The Dragon's Chosen One. Part 2. Elara stood at the highest balcony of Eldoria's grand palace, letting the cool night breeze brush against her face. The moon was full, illuminating the spires and walls below where torches flickered like earthbound stars. She should have felt victorious, for she had proven herself a warrior. Yet a restlessness gnawed at her thoughts. The people treated her with newfound respect, but there were too many whispers. She had caught fragments of rumor all day, hushed and fearful. There was talk of a prophecy, ancient and grim, that spoke of a dragon rider destined to save or destroy the kingdom. Whenever her name arose, voices hushed even further. She didn't need superhuman senses to feel the suspicion. A stable hand who used to greet her with friendly waves now watched her with cautious eyes. A group of palace guards, once welcoming, now drew back as she passed. The unspoken words stung more than any blade could. She ran a hand through her hair and looked upward. The sky above Eldoria stretched out, deep and endless. Somewhere beyond the walls, Zephiron roamed freely. He had begun hunting in the mountains at night, content that Elara was safe within palace walls. She missed his constant presence but knew he needed space to spread his wings. A gentle voice startled her. Kael stepped onto the balcony, his movements graceful despite the armor he wore. He hadn't shed it since returning from a council meeting. His eyes carried a flicker of concern. He studied her face a moment before speaking. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "It's late, and you're here alone." She managed a small smile. "I'm fine. Thinking too much, perhaps." His brow furrowed slightly. The court is abuzz with talk of the prophecy. They keep hinting that someone, some dragon rider, may bring about Eldoria's downfall. He paused and sighed. "I'm sorry. I tried to quell their fears, but rumors take on a life of their own." Elara's gaze fell upon the courtyard below. "I understand. Dragons used to be considered allies and guardians. But if an omen suggests one of us could lead to destruction..." She shrugged. "It's easier to look at the outsider and blame them." Kael took her hand gently. "You're no outsider to me, Elara. You've given everything to protect Eldoria's dragons. People fear what they can't understand, but we'll face it together." His words were warm, yet she could hear the tension in them. There were forces at play beyond his control or hers. She squeezed his hand and nodded. "Thank you," she said. "I just hope their doubts don't overshadow what we've accomplished." They lingered in companionable silence, the bond between them a quiet reassurance in a world of uncertainty. Finally, he kissed her knuckles and led her back inside. The next day the palace hummed with preparation. A delegation from a neighboring kingdom was due to arrive. Servants bustled about, polishing floors and adorning grand halls with fresh flowers. Elara, in her warrior's attire, observed the bustle from a corridor. She hadn't expected to be summoned to any formal event, yet an attendant rushed toward her, out of breath. "Elara," the young woman said, voice trembling with excitement, "Prince Kael requests your presence in the main hall. The delegation is arriving sooner than expected." Elara thanked her and made her way through the winding corridors. Her heart pounded for reasons she couldn't name. She'd grown used to the palace, but official ceremonies still felt foreign. When she entered the hall, Kael was already standing at the center, flanked by two high-ranking knights. He wore a regal tunic and cape. The serious expression on his face told her that today's arrival was more than a mere diplomatic visit. She glanced at him questioningly. He offered her a tight smile, then turned as the large doors opened. A herald announced the guests. Presenting Princess Seraphina of the Amber Haze Kingdom, accompanied by Lord Riven and Captain Illan. A trio entered. At the forefront was Seraphina, a woman of arresting beauty. She wore flowing robes of deep burgundy that highlighted her regal grace, and her long dark hair cascaded in carefully arranged waves. Her gaze flicked across the hall with poised confidence, then lit with warmth when it found Kael. Elara noted how the princess moved with purpose, shoulders back, chin high, the air of someone used to admiration. Kael stepped forward to greet her. "Princess Seraphina," he said. "Welcome to Eldoria." Seraphina's lips curved into a gracious smile. "It's been too long, Kael. I trust you've been keeping well?" He nodded, returning a polite smile of his own. "Yes, quite well. There's much to discuss, I'm sure. But first, let me introduce—" Seraphina's attention seemed to fall on Elara without waiting for Kael to finish. "Ah, you must be Elara," she said. Her voice was as silky as the robes she wore. "I've heard stories of your exploits. The warrior who tamed Zephiron, if the tales are to be believed." A slight raise of her brow suggested both curiosity and a reserved skepticism. "Tamed might be too strong a word," Elara said, feeling a swirl of unease. "Zephiron and I share a bond." Seraphina's gaze lingered on Elara a moment longer than necessary. "A bond that is the talk of the kingdoms, it seems. I look forward to learning more about it." Kael cleared his throat. "We have prepared guest chambers for you and your entourage, Princess. Shall we proceed to the council room afterward?" "Of course," Seraphina replied. "I look forward to sharing recent events from my father's court as well." She cast a final glance toward Elara, then followed a servant out of the hall. Elara felt her muscles tense. There had been an unmistakable familiarity in the way Seraphina addressed Kael. She forced herself to remain calm, telling herself that jealousy was beneath her. Yet an uneasy feeling settled in her stomach. She had never heard Kael speak of this princess, but the ease and warmth in their interaction revealed some shared past. When the others departed, Kael approached Elara. She sensed he could feel her tension. "I know you must have questions," he said gently. "Seraphina and we met years ago, before my father's passing. There was talk of a potential alliance, but circumstances changed. Our families never pursued it further." "Never?" she asked, her tone sharper than intended. He looked regretful. "Not on paper. My father was ill, and after he died, my priorities shifted toward the dragon's well-being. Seraphina returned to her kingdom to handle her own responsibilities. We haven't seen each other since." Elara studied his face, searching for any hidden emotions. She saw discomfort, perhaps guilt, or was it longing? She couldn't be sure. "All right," she said finally, forcing a calm smile. "I trust you." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "I hope you do. In any case, you and I have more pressing matters, especially now that rumors of a prophecy have spread. Please stay close during the meetings. I suspect Seraphina's visit isn't purely social." Elara nodded. Though she hated the prickle of insecurity, she told herself to remain focused. The entire kingdom might depend on them maintaining unity. Later, a formal council convened with the visiting delegation. Seraphina described recent events in the Amberhaze Kingdom, highlighting disturbances near their borders. Villages claimed to have seen dragons circling overhead at odd hours, only for the creatures to vanish as swiftly as they appeared. Reports of stolen livestock and scorched fields were growing, though no one had definitive proof of who or what was behind it. "This aligns with rumors we've heard as well," Kael said. "Some of our scouts have reported dragons missing from remote roosting grounds. At first we thought they migrated, but the pattern is too irregular." Seraphina's eyes flicked to Elara. "It seems your bond with Zephiron might be instrumental in solving this. You can sense dragons in a way others cannot, or so they say." Elara tried to read Seraphina's expression, unsure if her words were genuine praise or a subtle challenge. "I do share a strong connection with Zephiron," she replied. "If dragons are being taken, I want to help find them." Seraphina rested her chin on her hand. "I'd like to join this search. My father is quite distressed about the potential threat to our lands. If it leads beyond your borders, you'll need an ally." Kael glanced from Seraphina to Elara, measuring the mood. "There is safety in unity. And if these vanishings continue, it could threaten more than Eldoria. We'll plan an expedition then." Elara forced a neutral nod. Even though the idea of traveling with Seraphina stirred conflicting emotions, she reminded herself that alliances sometimes needed to be forged, even if they were uncomfortable. She could handle it. The meeting ended with plans for further discussion. As the council dispersed, Seraphina briefly pulled Kael aside. Elara caught only a few words. Old times and fond memories. Her heart panged, but she pretended not to notice, instead leaving the room with measured steps. She had to clear her head. She headed to the training grounds where she often sparred to work off tension. The clang of steel on steel greeted her as she passed the gates. A few guards nodded respectfully, the memory of her accomplishment still fresh. She selected a training sword and found an empty patch of ground to practice. Yet with each swing, her thoughts drifted to Kael and Seraphina. She nearly dropped her weapon when a voice addressed her. "Elara," a calm baritone called. She turned to see Sir Garrick, a seasoned knight with salt and pepper hair. He inclined his head politely. "May I?" She understood the request. He wished to spar. She nodded, grateful for the distraction. They squared off, and Garrick tested her with swift thrusts. She parried, focusing on each movement, forcing her mind away from personal worries. Sweat beaded on her brow as their wooden blades collided in a flurry of strikes. The harsh ring of impact filled the air. "You're distracted," Garrick noted, stepping back briefly. She forced a half-smile. "Maybe a little. Let's keep going." Another wave of attacks followed, this time more intense. Elara managed to counter each blow, though Garrick's skill was formidable. After a final clash, he disarmed her with a twist of his wrist. She exhaled, frustration coiling in her chest. "I have much to learn." "You've come a long way," he said gently, returning her sword. "But a warrior's mind must be focused. Whatever troubles you, face it, before it clouds your blade." His words held a certain wisdom she couldn't deny. She thanked him and left the training grounds, uncertain if she felt better or worse. Early the next morning, she met Kael in the royal stables. The day of departure had arrived faster than expected. Several wagons of supplies were being prepared, and a dozen knights had been selected to accompany them. Seraphina was already there, inspecting her horse's saddle with a practiced eye. Elara noticed how adeptly the princess handled the animal. She was no stranger to adventure, apparently. Zephiron soared overhead, preparing to follow from above. Elara called to him, mentally, sensing his readiness. He'd stay near, but not in the thick of the group, likely taking to the skies to scout ahead. "Are we ready?" Kael asked, adjusting the bridle on his own horse. He wore traveling leathers rather than ornate robes, a practical choice for what could be a dangerous mission. Elara nodded. She mounted her horse with a practiced swing, determined to maintain a calm exterior despite the anxiety gnawing at her. This journey would likely test them all. Their party departed Eldoria under a crisp sunrise. Seraphina rode close to Kael, chatting about times past and comparing political structures of their kingdoms. Elara tried not to listen, though her sensitive ears caught every detail. Now and then, Seraphina would toss a glance Elara's way, as if gauging her reactions. Elara said nothing, focusing instead on the road ahead. The route led through rolling hills, forests, and eventually more rugged terrain where the missing dragons had last been sighted. Knights scouted far ahead, returning with little news other than the occasional sign of burned brush or scattered feathers. It was as if the dragons had simply vanished into thin air. 3 days into the journey, they reached a region of rocky outcroppings, pocked with hidden caves. The air felt colder, and a strange hush pervaded the environment. No birds sang, and the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Let's make camp here," Kael announced as dusk settled. "We'll search the area at first light." Tents were erected in a shallow ravine, protected on 3 sides by cliffs. A fire crackled at the center. Knights shared simple meals of dried meats and bread. Seraphina joined them, though her refined manners looked out of place in the wilderness. Elara ate in relative silence, her mind churning with questions. Where were the dragons? Could they have moved en masse? Or had something taken them? After dinner, Kael quietly approached Elara. "Walk with me," he asked, gesturing away from the camp. She nodded, aware of Seraphina's gaze following them as they slipped into the shadows of the nearby rock formations. They strolled in silence until the camp's firelight was just a faint glow. Then Kael spoke, voice low. "I worry about the dragons, and I worry about you." Elara crossed her arms. "I'm not fragile," she said, a touch more sharply than intended. He shook his head. "That's not what I mean. Tensions in Eldoria are running high because of this prophecy, and I see how Seraphina's presence is affecting you. I just want you to know I haven't forgotten what truly matters." He hesitated. "What we have is real, Elara. Seraphina and I, that was another lifetime. It never grew into anything substantial. Please believe me." She felt a weight lift from her chest, though the doubt wasn't entirely gone. "I believe you," she said softly. "But you have a past. She's a part of it, whether I like it or not, and she's—" Elara searched for the right word. "She's confident, skilled, beautiful. It's hard not to feel uneasy." Kael's expression was earnest. "I won't deny she's formidable, but so are you. You've proven yourself in ways few have. I chose you, Elara, not the path others expected me to take. Even if the entire kingdom doubts you, I do not." She stepped closer, touched by the sincerity in his tone. He reached out and took her hand. The night air felt cooler, but warmth bloomed where their fingers intertwined. "That means more to me than you know," she whispered. He leaned in, kissing her softly, the lingering taste of the wild on both their lips. It was a brief, tender moment, but enough to reaffirm their bond. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his, letting the silence speak volumes. However, a distant roar shattered that calm. They both jerked upright, scanning the dark horizon. "That sounded like a dragon," Kael said. "It came from the cliffs to the east." Elara nodded, heart pounding. "We should investigate." They rushed back to camp and gathered a small group of knights along with Seraphina, who insisted on joining. Torches in hand, they made their way toward the sound. Zephiron flew overhead, though in the darkness only the distant beating of his wings was audible. As they climbed a narrow path, the roar echoed again, louder this time. Elara felt a chill. This was not the confident bellow of a free dragon. It was tinged with fear or pain. The path curved around a jutting rock formation until they emerged onto a ledge overlooking a deep ravine. There, by moonlight, they saw a large dragon pinned beneath a web of glowing chains. 3 shadowy figures chanted incantations, their voices low and ominous. The dragon thrashed, letting out a desperate roar that resonated through the chasm. Sparks of arcane energy danced along its scales. Seraphina's eyes widened. "Dark magic," she hissed. "Who dares cast such spells on a living creature?" Kael motioned for silence. They crept closer, but stealth was nearly impossible on the exposed ledge. One of the figures turned, revealing a masked face. A flash of light erupted from his palm, forcing Elara and the others to shield their eyes. Knights charged forward, weapons raised. Elara darted around them, seeking a way to free the dragon. Kael engaged a second sorcerer, steel clashing with conjured force. Seraphina deftly blocked a bolt of crackling energy with a jeweled dagger, her reflexes surprisingly sharp. Elara rushed to the dragon's side, searching for a weak point in the enchanted chains. She glanced around for a tool to break them, but the metal glowed with potent magic. Before she could attempt anything, the third sorcerer launched a swirling vortex of darkness toward her. She rolled aside just in time. Zephiron, having circled around, dove at the attackers, unleashing a blast of fire that momentarily scattered them. In that break, Elara seized a fallen spear. She channeled every ounce of will into driving its tip beneath the chain links. Sparks flew, and the chain gave a shriek of protest. The dragon pinned beneath it groaned, eyes rolling in desperation. "Hold on," Elara murmured. "We'll free you." Kael finished off one sorcerer with a deft sword strike. the figure collapsing in a swirl of tattered robes. Another tried to flee, but Seraphina's dagger flew through the air, catching the attacker's shoulder and sending him crashing to the ground with a cry. That left the final foe, who shrieked a chant that made the chain glow brighter. A wave of power slammed into Elara, sending her skidding across the rocky ground. She gasped, vision hazy. The sorcerer prepared another attack, but Kael was faster, tackling him to the ground. They struggled, fists and steel clashing. Zephiron swooped down once more, unleashing a breath of flame that melted part of the chain, enough for the captured dragon to yank itself free with a roar. Elara scrambled to her feet, feeling the sting of scraped palms. She lunged for the last portion of the chain, wrestling it aside so the dragon could stand. The creature's wings unfurled with difficulty, and it let out a furious roar at the hooded figures. One tried to conjure a barrier, but the dragon's swipe knocked him aside like a rag doll. In the chaos, the remaining sorcerers vanished in a swirl of dark smoke. Whether they fled or teleported, Elara couldn't tell. Silence descended, broken only by the dragon's labored breathing. Its scales were scorched and battered. Elara approached cautiously, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We mean you no harm," she said softly. "Can you stand?" The dragon regarded her warily, then lowered its head as if in surrender. She noted the bruised wings and lacerations, signs of a prolonged struggle. Zephiron landed next to her, rumbling in concern. The freed dragon answered with a weary sigh, recognition lighting in its eyes when it saw Zephyron's protective stance. Kael and Seraphina joined them, breathing hard. Knights gathered as well, though many wore uncertain looks, unfamiliar with the situation where a wounded dragon was so close. Kael sheathed his sword, eyeing the battered creature sympathetically. "Who would do this?" Seraphina asked, voice laced with anger. Elara shook her head. "I don't know, but they used dark magic, and they said a chant that strengthened the chains. This might be the fate of the missing dragons." Kael looked grim. "We need to find out who is behind this. They could be building an army or harvesting power. Either way, it's a threat to us all." The newly freed dragon attempted to spread its wings but winced in pain. Without hesitation, Elara knelt at its side, pressing a hand gently against its neck. She closed her eyes, recalling her early days of healing wounded creatures. Though she was no mage, her compassion and experience often comforted dragons. To her relief, the dragon's trembling eased slightly. Zephiron nudged Elara as if offering encouragement. She reached for her satchel, extracting a small vial of healing salve she had packed. With careful hands, she applied it to the worst of the dragon's injuries. The knights watched in awe. Some whispered among themselves, clearly unsettled by seeing Elara so close to a massive beast. Still, the creature allowed her ministrations, trusting her in this fragile moment. Seraphina knelt as well, surprising Elara by offering a fold of gauze. "This might help with the bleeding on its foreleg." Elara hesitated but accepted with a nod of thanks. Together they worked quickly, forging a temporary truce in the face of greater danger. The dragon's eyes fluttered, exhaustion evident. Soon it curled up on the rocky ledge, breathing unsteadily. Kael turned to the knights. "Set up a secondary camp here. We can't move this dragon in its condition. Some of you, scout the area. The rest, help gather supplies so we can care for it." His orders were met with salutes. Seraphina stood, brushed dust from her fine robes, and fixed her gaze on Elara. "You surprised me with how gentle you are, even in the midst of battle." Elara managed a thin smile. "They're not just beasts. They're living, thinking creatures. If we don't treat them with respect, we're no better than those attackers." Seraphina inclined her head. "Perhaps I misjudged you." Then she stepped away to oversee the knights. Exhaustion weighed on Elara's limbs, yet her mind churned with urgent questions. Who were these sorcerers? What did they want with captive dragons? Was this the prelude to something far worse? Night deepened and the group made camp around the injured dragon, building a protective circle of tents and torches. Kael arranged extra guards to stand watch. As Elara and Kael settled near the fire, Seraphina joined them, her expression serious. The three formed an uneasy triangle, each holding a piece of the puzzle. "We should share everything we know," Seraphina suggested. "If the missing dragons are being bound by dark magic, it means these sorcerers are well organized, possibly part of a cult or a hidden faction. My father's spies mentioned robed figures seen in abandoned fortresses along our border. We dismissed them as minor threats." Elara glanced at Kael, then spoke. "In Eldoria, we've heard rumors of shadowy gatherings, but we never had proof. Until tonight." Kael rubbed his temples. "We need to track these people." "But how? The sorcerers vanished into thin air. If they have magic powerful enough to trap dragons, they're dangerous indeed." Seraphina's voice dropped to a near whisper. "There's an old library in the Amberhaze capital. It houses scrolls on forbidden magic. Perhaps we could find references to these chains there." Elara felt a chill. "That means venturing deeper into your kingdom. Are you certain you can trust your own court if such dark forces are involved?" Seraphina's eyes flickered with a hint of sadness. "I'm not entirely sure, but we have to try." Kael nodded. "Then that's our next step." They continued planning late into the night, forging a delicate alliance. Seraphina's knowledge, Kael's leadership, and Elara's bond with dragons would be critical if they were to unravel this mystery. Now and then, Seraphina's gaze lingered on Kael with a familiarity that pricked Elara's heart, but in moments of genuine discussion, it seemed overshadowed by the seriousness of their mission. Eventually, the fire burned low. Knights rotated watches, the wounded dragon rested fitfully, and the group tried to snatch a few hours of sleep. Elara nestled close to Kael, feeling the warmth of his presence, even though her mind spun with unsettling images of chains and robed figures. Days passed in a blur of travel and investigation. They guided the freed dragon back toward safer territory, where local healers could tend to it further. Zephiron often flew ahead, scouting for any signs of more missing dragons or hidden enclaves of sorcerers. Each time he returned without success, Elara's frustration grew. She felt the weight of the prophecy pressing on her shoulders. If the kingdom truly believed the chosen rider might doom them, any misstep could confirm their worst fears. Seraphina was never far from Kael's side, offering diplomatic support whenever they encountered border outposts or local lords. Elara tried to keep her jealousy in check, reminding herself that Seraphina's presence was beneficial. Still, she couldn't forget the affectionate way Seraphina sometimes addressed Kael, or the private words they exchanged in passing. Kael, for his part, showed no sign of wavering in his devotion to Elara, yet the uncertainty gnawed at her nonetheless. In time, they reached a small fortress near the Amberhaze capital. Seraphina's father had offered them refuge while they searched the secret library archives. Surrounded by high walls of pale stone, the fortress overlooked a vast plain dotted with farmlands. The tension was palpable the moment they arrived. Servants cast quick glances at Elara and Zephiron. Guards stood rigid, eyes narrowed, as though prepared for an attack from within. Inside the fortress, large tapestries draped the corridors, depicting battles long past. Elara sensed an undercurrent of suspicion from the staff, yet they dared not voice it openly while their princess was present. Seraphina guided Kael and Elara to a secluded reading chamber where ancient tomes lined the walls. A single lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows across the pages. "We're looking for references to chain-like spells or incantations used to subdue magical creatures," Seraphina explained. "I'll start with these volumes on draconic lore. You two can check the shelves on ancient cults and forbidden rituals." Hours stretched into the evening, the quiet broken only by the rustle of turning pages. Elara discovered cryptic references to a group called the Twilight Embrace, rumored to harness the blood of dragons for dark enchantments. Kael found passages describing archaic metals and runes that could drain a dragon's strength. Seraphina uncovered an old poem hinting at a chosen rider caught between two fates. They met around a wooden table, frowning at the scattered parchment. Seraphina tapped a passage in a worn ledger. The Twilight Embrace once operated in hidden keepers across various realms, capturing magical beasts to siphon their essence. If they've resurfaced, they could be behind these vanishings. Elara's breath caught. Then the prophecy, the vanishings. It might all tie together. Maybe they believe harnessing the chosen dragon rider's power could tip the balance in their favor. Kael's jaw tightened. We have to stop them before they ensnare more dragons or spread panic further. Their conversation was interrupted by the echo of a bell. A fortress guard rushed into the chamber, face pale. Princess Seraphina, Prince Kael, Elara. Some of our scouts spotted robed figures near the western perimeter. They seemed to be gathering dragons. In a heartbeat, Elara was on her feet. Kael grabbed his sword. Seraphina's eyes blazed with determination. The fortress sprang into action, knights arming themselves, servants fleeing to safer quarters. They rode out in the twilight, led by the scouts to a remote clearing. Torches bobbed in the darkness. Elara's heart hammered when she glimpsed multiple dragons, their silhouettes stooped as if weighed down by something. The air pulsed with the sickly glow of runes etched into the ground. Hooded figures chanted, focusing on the circle of dragons. Elara urged her horse forward, but Kael grasped her reins. Wait, he whispered, they outnumber us. She took in the scene. Indeed, the clearing teemed with dark-robed sorcerers, far more than at the ledge. This wasn't a small operation. It was an orchestrated ritual. Seraphina, on Kael's other side, clenched her fists. We have to disrupt this, or the dragons will be lost. Elara nodded, a swirl of courage and fear in her chest. She gave a mental call to Zephiron, urging him to lead the aerial approach. When he soared overhead, many sorcerers looked up in alarm. That was all the distraction the group needed. Kael, Seraphina, and the knights charged into the clearing, steel flashing by torchlight. The chanting fractured, replaced by shouts and the clash of blades. Elara dismounted and sprinted toward the ring of captive dragons. They lay bound by glowing chains, eyes glazed with pain. Each chain was linked to a rune on the ground. She realized she had to break the runes or the chains would remain unbreakable. But how? Kael fought beside her, deflecting a sorcerer's staff. Seraphina hurled a small orb of shimmering light that disrupted one incantation. Elara found an unguarded rune, jabbed her sword into it, and twisted. A burst of sparks erupted, the rune cracking. Instantly, one dragon convulsed, shattering its chain. It roared in newfound freedom and lunged at the nearest sorcerer. The chaotic dance continued. Elara saw glimpses of Seraphina battling with smooth precision, her dagger glinting. She heard Kael bark orders to the knights, urging them to protect the freed dragons. Smoke and fiery blasts filled the air as dragons struggled to fight or flee. Dark energies crackled around the sorcerers, swirling in menacing patterns that threatened to overwhelm the defenders. Amid the melee, Elara spotted a tall figure wreathed in shadow, chanting in a guttural tongue. This figure seemed to control many of the swirling energies, weaving them into a vortex of black flame. Her instincts screamed that this was their leader. She moved to intercept, but a barrier of crackling force knocked her backward. Pain exploded in her ribs. Struggling to rise, she locked eyes with the hooded leader. Beneath the cowl, she glimpsed pale skin and a cruel twist of lips. He intoned a final phrase. The ground trembled, cracking open to reveal a seething well of darkness. Two dragons still lay trapped, their chains attached to this unearthly pit. Elara's heart hammered. She had to stop him. Summoning every ounce of courage, she rushed forward. Zephiron dove, unleashing a torrent of fire at the barrier. The leader staggered, giving Elara a brief opening. She leaped through the dissipating shield and slashed at the chain binding the nearest dragon. Her blade sparked uselessly. This chain felt stronger than the others. The robed leader snarled a spell, sending black tendrils to coil around her wrists. She gasped, feeling her strength sapped. The man's voice hissed in her ear. The chosen rider? Yes. Your bond will feed the final rite. He raised one hand, dark magic coalescing into a dagger-like shape. Desperation flared within Elara. She struggled, calling mentally to Zephiron, though the next blow seemed certain to end her. A flash of steel came from behind. Kael tackled the leader, letting Elara tear free from the dark tendrils. She stumbled to her feet, adrenaline coursing wildly. The chain that bound the last dragon still pulsed. She closed her eyes, recalling how she freed the first captive dragon. With cunning and Zephiron's help, she beckoned him mentally. He soared in at tremendous speed, raking the chain with razor claws. Sparks flew, the chain cracked. A triumphant roar erupted as the dragons yanked themselves free, scuttling away from the swirling darkness. The robed leader howled in rage. He unleashed a wave of force that sent Kael sprawling. Seraphina darted in, slashing with her dagger. The leader countered with black fire that singed her cloak. Elara ran to Kael's side, helping him stand. He was bloodied but determined. "We have to end this now," she said, breath ragged. "I'll distract him," Kael growled. "You find a way to seal that pit." Elara nodded. Kael rushed forward, feinting to draw the leader's attention. Elara scanned the swirling darkness. She noticed the rune-laden staff lying near the ground where the leader had first stood. It glowed with chaotic energy that seemed linked to the open fissure. Without hesitation, she lunged for the staff. The leader saw her move and bellowed, twisting to cast another spell, but Kael's blade struck, forcing him to defend. Elara seized the staff. A jolt of dark power surged through her, threatening to overwhelm. She thought of all she held dear: Kael, Zephiron, Eldoria's dragons. Focusing on that love, she channeled her will into the staff, turning its energy inward. The staff sparked and hissed. With a violent crack, it snapped in two. Instantly, the well of darkness flickered and began to collapse. A roar of anguish burst from the leader's throat. He threw Kael aside and flung a desperate bolt of black fire at Elara. She braced for pain, but Seraphina hurled herself in front of Elara, a glowing amulet raised. The fire struck the amulet, deflecting around them in a shower of sparks. The leader staggered, face contorting with fury, then, like the others before, vanished in swirling smoke. In the clearing, the remaining sorcerers fled, their spells undone. Freed dragons bellowed in triumph, turning on the few robed figures who tried to stand their ground. Knights captured some, but most disappeared into the night. The well of darkness sealed, leaving only scorched earth. Silence gradually fell as the conflict ended. Elara let the broken staff drop from her trembling hands. She turned to Seraphina, who panted from exertion. Their eyes met, and for once there was no competition, only mutual relief. "Thank you," Elara said quietly. Seraphina nodded, her own voice hoarse. "I wasn't about to let you die, especially not when so much depends on you." Kael hobbled over, clutching a gash in his side. Elara rushed to support him, her heart twisting at the sight of his injury. He smiled weakly. "We won, I think." Elara pressed her forehead to his. "Yes, but you're hurt." "We both are," Seraphina murmured, touching her scorched shoulder. "But it's worth it if the dragons are safe." They surveyed the devastation. Some dragons had taken flight the moment they were freed, while a few lingered, examining the battlefield as if ensuring the danger had passed. Zephiron landed beside Elara, nuzzling her gently, relief emanating from his mighty form. The knights regrouped, collecting the injured and tending to them. The air was thick with the smell of ash and the metallic tang of magic. Darkness still clung to the edges of the clearing, a reminder of what they had faced. Exhaustion weighed on Elara, yet her mind roiled with questions. The twilight embrace, if that was indeed who they were, had been thwarted tonight, but not destroyed. Their leader remained at large, and so did their vile schemes. Kael wrapped an arm around Elara's waist, leaning on her for support. "We'll need to warn Eldoria and Amberhaze. This threat is bigger than we thought." Seraphina nodded in agreement. "We also need to address the prophecy. If they believe you, Elara, are central to it, they might try again." Her gaze lingered on Elara, a newfound respect in her eyes. "I only hope we can stand united when the time comes." Elara nodded. Despite her jealousy, a bond was forming between them all, a sense of shared purpose beyond personal rivalries. She could feel it in the way Seraphina stood shoulder to shoulder with her, the way Kael's hand squeezed hers in reassurance, the way knights nodded in gratitude to her and Zephiron. They were forging a fragile alliance, one that might be the kingdom's only hope. They began the slow process of returning to the fortress, supporting each other every step of the way. Freed dragons flew overhead, some disappearing into the starlit sky, others choosing to remain close as if offering silent gratitude. Elara felt a stirring in her chest. She recalled the prophecy's words, whispered by fearful courtiers. Chosen rider, savior, or doom. Perhaps the real path was somewhere in between, shaped by choices and forged by love. The night stretched on as the group trudged back, tending to wounds and comforting those shaken by the battle. Though weary, Elara was keenly aware that their journey was far from over. New alliances had been born, old rivalries set aside. But the twilight embrace would not rest, and the prophecy still loomed over them like a storm on the horizon. Still, for a fleeting moment, as Kael leaned into her for warmth and Zephiron soared overhead, Elara allowed herself to hope. Together, they had faced a force of darkness and emerged victorious. If they could hold on to that unity, perhaps they could overcome even the bleakest prophecy. They pressed onward, determined to unveil the secrets lurking in ancient scripts, to rally dragons and humans alike against the rising tide of shadowy power. Each step echoed with the promise that love, trust, and courage might stand against any darkness, no matter how deep. And so Elara and Kael walked into the unknown, hearts entwined, futures bound by the flames of destiny.